Jordan, all your hockey coaching, teaching, education, leadership, what's the parallel between teaching and coaching? Good teachers and good coaches.
Well, I think it's comes down to one word and connection, and it comes down to coaches being willing to make appropriate connections with their players, and being invested in their players. And I think that same with teachers. That right now we're just coming off of the longest ever strike in our province's history, and we've got 3 days here. The message has been the same to all my teachers: use this time to create connections again. And teachers are frustrated and with the way in which we were legislated back, and they're going through their own pieces with it. But the biggest thing is you can see that yesterday was a tough day and today is getting a little bit better. I'm going to pop off this call and head out into the hallways and classrooms and see the connections that are being made again. And so that's what it comes down to: meeting the players where they are, or meeting the students where they are. And it's a little different in a classroom where you don't get to choose, but a great reminder to coaches, and even a reminder to myself at times, is these are players you selected. So if you're getting frustrated with a player that you selected, you need to figure out how to reconnect and how to make that connection stronger, where they will believe in you and you can continue to believe in them. So that's where it comes down to, for me, Wally, anyway, is that connection piece.
Well, how can you better connect with your players?
Well, it's that comes with establishing your connections early on, and establishing that trust, that they can trust in you, before you trust in them, technically. But it's yeah, it's work. They're relationships. You have to get to know your players on a personal level, and get to know bits and pieces about them. It's kind of one of those things that a mentor teacher said to me a long time ago. He said I was teaching what at that time they call it remedial math. So it was people that struggled a bit with math. And he goes, so I was bringing in things that were relevant to them. And he said, working in a rural community, he said, talking about horses and things like that. And he said, I goes, I don't know whether they ever actually learned the math, but he goes, they knew about my horses. They knew about everything about me. And he goes, I got to know about them. And he goes, they gave it their best effort. And that piece. And so I think that's part of it, Wally, is that you have to get to know them. I know that I had a teacher that I worked with that had played professional at the highest level, and he said that there was a coach, and I won't name them because you would all know the name, but he said he played for this coach that was recognized as a really good hockey mind. But he said, if I saw him away from the rink, he said, anywhere in the city, he said that person wouldn't even acknowledge me. And he said, so he said, we actually played for our assistant coaches because they were the ones that made the connections. He said that head coach, he goes, at the rink, he would be the one that would tell me what I was doing wrong or tell me what I was doing right. But he said, when the person wouldn't even acknowledge you in a crowd, in anywhere else in the city, he said that made it a little tough to actually feel like you were meant anything to them.
Yeah. That's a question I have about one-on-one with players. Tom, you've got your bus trips and you've sat down and done one-on-ones with players, but have they only been related to X's and O's, tactics and team play?
Just sit down and ask them how they're doing, where they go to school, what this kind of stuff. Try to get to know them a little better. That's part of that's part of the deal. But, you know, it's so much more difficult. Like, you know, coaching college, you have your own dressing room and all that kind of stuff. We practice consistently at one rink on Tuesday, and of course there's girls, so I can't go in that dressing room. But on Thursday we practice, I think, with 4 different rinks. So tonight we're at Max Bell. Last week we were at Crowchild, and the week before at Henry Viney. So it makes it more difficult when you don't have a consistent place. You know, so that's why I find the bus trips. That's when the players are there and you get to talk to them. You know, I just at this level, and in college I used to talk to them a few times a year just to see how things were going, how school was going, and all that sort of thing. But,
Peter, what did you do to get to know your players better?
That was a big thing with me. Initially, what I did was I would hand out an index card with questions on there that, you know, were somewhat generic, right? Mother's name, mom's name and dad, brothers, sisters. Then we got into hobbies, favorite foods, what do you do away from hockey, your favorite movie, the list went on and on. So that I began to get a sense of who that kid was. And that helped me too. Even in when I was putting some lines together, you'd be surprised when people have a certain measure of commonality away from the hockey piece, how it manifests itself on the ice in a positive way. So I did that. Community service was huge for me too. Division II hockey, which is what I coached, they keep track of community service nationwide. And we actually, for one, it might have been 2 years, I think one for sure, we might have been tied the second year. We had the most community service hours of any men's ice hockey program in the United States. We had something at school called the Swoopy Award because we had this giant eagle costume, and the mascot's name was Swoop. So they named the award after him, and it took into consideration athletic success, academic success, and then your impact on campus. We won that 2 years running. So we spent a lot of time in getting to know the players, and I'm still on texts with guys now that we're on the team that, you know, at this point I'm removed 10 years. So getting to know them was more than worth the while. More than worthwhile. I've got 3 guys that, when I coached at prep school, are now American Hockey League coaches, and we're still on a text chain together. And I make sure I get to their games, and, you know, they give me tickets and all that good stuff like that. But it's huge. You just got to spend the time because it's a lot of fun getting to know these kids. It really is. And then following, if you're fortunate to be able to follow up on what has happened to them in their lives, you know, the marriages, the career choices, all those things. There's a lot more to being a coach that you can get out of it than X's and O's and winning and losing games.
You know, Jordan, there's a number of teachers back in my day that actually exchanged letters with players, Christmas cards and those kinds of things. It's quite amazing. Like they have this personal connection. I couldn't do it. I did with certain people, you know, 1 or 2 of the students maybe that were having difficulty or I seem to relate to, but I think there's some teachers that have a tremendous capacity to authentically know and get to learn about their students or their players more than what we do usually. So I think that's a good point here. And when you were talking, this was the Montreal Canadiens, but it has a story to do strictly with the chemistry of your team. And I don't know, Jordan, you can think about this one. but Wayne Halliwell was a sports psychologist for the Canadians, and they had the players write down who they would want to go out to a movie with, who they would invite over with their family for dinner, and who they'd want to be with in a bunker at war. And those three symbolic issues, they connected the dots of all the players. And if any players were disconnected, nobody connected with, wasn't connected in any way, shape, or form. They made a point as a coaching staff to get them connected, whether it was in terms of roommates or social events, grouping in classroom sessions, and the result paid off. It's just an interesting exercise to get to know the difference in the team in terms of who they really get along with and who they want to be with, and their companies that they're looking for.
John Cooper borrowed that one, Wally, with Tampa Bay, and I saw it, and I've actually used it as well. And it's, you figure out really quickly who your players are connected to each other, how they're connecting to one another, and there's some that aren't surprises, but there's the odd one that's a surprise. And then I've also got a listing of descriptors that I put together that players can use, and they have to pick a teammate of who fulfills the descriptor. I wish I could find it here right away, and share it with you. But it was really interesting activity for the kids, and the great part about it is that when you go back through it with the team, that every single player on their team hears a positive description of themselves, and they hear how their teammates see them, and that's a good one too. But yeah, that connection piece is so key. And going back to what you said about some teachers connecting where there's Christmas cards and those sorts of things, well, that's not quite where I'm looking at it, the connection piece. I'm looking at kind of like Peter's talking about, that you have a conversation with each kid or each player. And I know that Barry Midori always talked with every kid every day, making sure that you chat with, try and make that connection every day, especially in those short-term competitions. And that's being a mentor in those short-term competitions. I always ask the coaching staff after the first few activities and things when their team is together, I ask the same question every year, and it's, is there anybody on this team that you believe is alone? And I always get the question back, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, look at your team. Is there any one player that is alone by choice, or alone have isolated themselves, meaning alone by choice, or alone by being isolated by their teammates? And that's an important thing to recognize as a coach, that your team, are they connected to one another in that way? And for me in a school, it's always, it doesn't matter whether it's been a school that my current one of 450 kids or one of nearly 1,000, I would tour at lunchtime to see if there were any kids that were alone, because the number one way of students being successful is having a connection in the building. So you look, there are some that are alone by choice, that they've been in classes and they don't want to be around anybody at lunch, so they're sitting reading a book or just being alone by choice, and you check that out. But are there ones that are alone not by choice, that they've been isolated or they don't really have a connection. And so then that's where you try and support them. One of my or my assistant principal this year, it was pretty cool that on the first day there were students that were all brand new to our school. So being a smaller school, she gathered those ones all together and put them together at the same table at lunchtime. You're new, you're new, you're new, and she put them all together so that they all were all going through it together and as new students. And some of them now we're seeing that they're connected to each other. So it worked out well that way.
Well, Jordan, having worked with you over the years and knowing as a principal when you were at the elementary school, I'm not sure if you do the same at high school, but you greeted the kids when they got off the buses at elementary school. And I think that's huge.
I've done it at every school, Wally, as an administrator, because it was something I recognized an assistant principal did when I was a student, and he was the same assistant principal at our K to 12 school my entire 13 years there. So from kindergarten through grade 12, and there's two parts to it. One is that it does allow you to create connections with the kids. The other part is that especially at a high school, you might be the first adult that they actually interact with in the day. So giving them a good morning and a smile is a pretty easy piece of currency to getting them and setting the tone of them coming into the building. And then the third piece with it is just that piece of recognizing, are there some students who are coming into your building that maybe are dysregulated already? And so when you figure that piece out and how they're arriving, you can look to support them in how they need to be supported. But it's a real easy connection, a place to make connections. And do you get a good morning out of every single kid at the high school level? Absolutely not. But some kids, a grunt as they're walking by is a connection. It's in one way or another. And so it's one of those pieces that, it's an easy way to connect. I know that Peter Smith talked about with his McGill team that it became regular that they all said goodbye to him, that when they were leaving the rink, he was in his office and every single player said goodbye. And he said that it became just something that their leadership core taught the next grouping of players, and he said it worked out great. He said I was able to make a connection with each kid as they were leaving, and he goes, those ones that needed to hang around and ask me a question, they felt they could. And it's that piece I think is really important.
I have to mention, when I was working with Hockey Canada, I went to Montreal and spent a lot of time in his office before and after practices. And what you said about the comfort of the players coming in his office and talking for a moment, going back to the dressing room or coming in and out, it was so natural and authentic. It was amazing. And it was his personality of the way he communicated with his athletes. And Jordan, the one thing I want to mention, I've never ever seen a coach except you who arrives at the rink and leaves the rink, probably one of the earliest arrivers and one of the latest to leave. And in the leaving, it's acknowledging the kids and saying goodbye to them. I know myself as a coach, I had trouble getting there just early enough for everybody. And now you got to be there much earlier. They're dryland training before games, or maybe they're doing a warm-up dryland. I don't know. But the time you spent before and after acknowledging them is huge. And that's something Dave King has tried to get his staff to do with the national team. Spread out the duties. everybody had to talk to every player had to be talked to at a personal level by the coach during the practice, before, during, or after. And it's something that's worth noting. And I think we're so caught up in the X's and O's and talking about we need to do this, we need to do that. And we forget that human side. So good on you for doing that.
Well, last night I didn't hang around real long last night. We were debriefing with Craig and wanted to catch the last couple innings of the Blue Jays game. So we quickly hustled out of there to get over to Big Rock, the closest place with a television. And so, but yes, it is something, and I know you've asked me that one before, and when it comes to with the kids at the U18 level, especially, it's that many of them are driving themselves. So I always want to make sure that they at least are able to get on the road after things without a problem. And so that's part of the method of the madness of staying till the last one is leaving, is making sure that they're safely on their way. I can't make sure that they get home safely, but I know that they can start safely and that their vehicle starts and away they go. So,
George, can I get you to share your story? I was mentoring with you, and a girl had a flat tire in Okotoks.
Oh no, that one wasn't in Okotoks. I think the Okotoks one was, we ended up boosting a vehicle there, Wally, but. And I ended up boosting a vehicle outside of Max Bell that wasn't one of my players. It was a player from the other team that we'd played, the other fire team. But the flat tire one was at Father David Bauer when I was coaching the AAA team for the first time, and had a player that, same thing. I saw they were the last two to leave, or relatively last two to leave, and so I'm going out to my own vehicle because I know there are no more players left in the dressing room. And I walk out, and here's two players that are basically standing, staring at a flat tire. And I'm like, what, are you waiting for it to miraculously inflate itself or what? And they said, no, we don't know what to do. And I said, well, do you have a spare? And the owner of the car turned to me and goes, if I were a spare tire, where would I be? And I said, well, probably in the trunk. And so we got looking around, and sure enough, there was the spare. And I said, I'm not changing this for you, but I'll make sure that you safely get it changed. And so went through the process of changing the tire, and I made sure that the lug nuts were tight for them to make the trip home on the spare. And so away they went, and a few days later, I got an email from the dad of the player that was a lengthy email, but thanking me for taking the time to support his daughter in changing the tire. And he was quite a car guy, and he said he went and got the flat fixed, but they needed to change it back onto the car, and he said, my daughter wouldn't let me do it. She said, I need to make sure that I'm able to do it if I need to again. And he said, so she let me sit in a lawn chair and supervise her changing the tire back to being on her car. So she learned a skill that way, I guess.
Yeah. Tom, any personal stories like that in your teaching school? Your personalization of opening up to the kids outside of the X's and O's?
Well, throughout the years, there's lots of things. Nothing pops to my mind. I think I had a special relationship with the women's team at Mount Royal, because a whole bunch of them are still on my Facebook, and I read about back when we played Grand Prairie. One of my former players, her daughter was playing for Grand Prairie. She's their top scorer right now. But I get, happy birthdays from them and everything like that more than any other team. I was there for 5 years, and I had a lot of them for 4 years in a row too, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, not that popped to the top of my mind right now.
Well, you know, you talked about Mount Royal, and how many years did you coach Mount Royal?
I was there 5.
Okay, so you got a chance to work with the same athletes for a long period of time,
Yeah.
and
But I was thinking of a story from Mount Royal. I had one girl, she was there my first year. Then my 4th year, something happened to her and she missed for a month. And we didn't win a game that month. We lost more games that month than I'd lost total the first 3 years. Because I think we lost 2 games. We've only played like 20 games. 2 games and 3 games and 4 games or something. We lost 9 games in a row. And a lot of it was my goalies couldn't stop a basketball for a while. But, and then she came back and we dropped from 1st to 4th place. And then we went on a win, winning. And she'd scored about the most 4 or 5 goals in a season. And then come the playoffs, so we're playing the first place team. And we beat them. I think it was Grant McEwen. And we beat them. We ended up losing in the finals. But she set a record. She scored 12 goals in the playoffs. And it was unbelievable. She scored more goals in the playoffs than she had her previous 4th year. And the team, and I never realized how important she was to the team until then. And, so sometimes players can go under the radar if they're not spectacular, kind of whatever. But I think she had a huge influence in the dressing room. And so just saying that it's hard to be aware of everything that's happening, but there's some things happening in the background that you may not, as a coach, realize how important some player is.
we know Jordan and Tom, that story, your story, and I'm thinking of that Wayne Helliwell thing about who would you have over for dinner, who would you go to a movie with, and who do you want with you in the trenches. I'll bet you she might have been in one category with every player on the team.
Yeah, she probably was.
And I think that's something to find out. Just for that, you can underestimate the positive influence of the camaraderie of them getting along and respecting her to that degree. And in your case, I think it's worth experimenting with, even at your age right now. And I don't know, you might come up with some different examples, like instead of being in a bunker at war on the guy's side, you could say you got to dig up a bunch of potatoes. You got to do hard labor for an afternoon or something, or help you mow the lawn, or this kind of thing. But I'd be curious about that. That's a very interesting story. And Jordan, have you ever experienced anything like that? That players left and suddenly returned, and you realize how impactful they were on the team?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, as Tom mentioned, that there's the odd player that is kind of one of those glue people that stick kids together, and of course we look at formal leaders on teams and work hard to make sure that they're growing and in understanding their role as a leader. But sometimes there are those players that just simply are the type that glue people together, and they are the ones that are the conduits to the connections for everybody, and it's kind of fun to see that, and I guess some of the NHL teams and some of those pro baseball teams, and that you can tell that the ones that are functioning at the highest level, that you might sometimes question, why is that person on their roster, and but then if the truth be known, it's because they're the ones that keep everybody else going.
Dave King.
This year, what we did, we met with every player or the whole coaching staff, and one of our questions, because we were trying to decide on captains, they each gave us 4 names of people they thought would make good captains, and that kind of gave us an idea of who people looked up to on the team.
Dave King mentioned Theron Fleury when he coached the Flames. He said players followed him around. He was a magnet for the team. His energy, his humor, his wit, and his competitiveness. It was something that he brought to the team that he noticed away from the rink when they were on road trips. And that's a good point. The selection of captains and Jordan, have you picked your captains?
Yeah, well, we have, and we do something along those lines that, like Tom did, that we ask for players' input, but we do a leadership thing and talking about, well, what is a leader, and what are the attributes of a leader that you would want to follow, and then going to it and having them think of who they feel are leaders on the team and why they would follow them. Because I guess ultimately the first one, when we start talking about leadership, it's the whole piece of what does a leader need to be a leader? And there's only one thing. And of course they start listing off characteristics, but what is the one and only thing that a leader needs to be a leader? Is followers. And so it's what makes you want to follow them. And you say that if there may be people that think that they're leaders and nobody's following them, they're not a leader. Or the opposite. There are times in your life where you don't want to be the leader, but everybody else is following you. So it's that piece. So, but yeah, I did find that piece that you were talking about, Wally. And so here are the 5 that I put together with it. One is foxhole situations. When you find yourself in need of an ally to join you in a battle, who would you want with you? The other one is night out. If you were going out to the movies or for a social situation, who would you want to join you? Family time. If your family was having some time together and said that you could invite one person to join you, who would you want that to be? Study time. If you needed to complete an assignment or study for a test, who would you ask to help you? And then the confidant. If you needed someone to share your thoughts or feelings with, who would you choose to chat with? And so those are the adaptation to what you had. And then the other ones that I had was kind of a pick a player, choose one of your teammates to fit each of the following descriptions. And so one was like Swiss Army knife. They're prepared for any situation. Eddie the Eagle doesn't take no for an answer, is trying to be at their best. Silent but deadly. On the quieter side, but fierce when need to be. Elsa can remain cool as ice while under pressure. The Energizer Bunny only has an on switch and keeps going and going. Feel the beat, plays a physical style of play, and the opposition always knows that they're there. Kleptomaniac is always stealing pucks from the opposition. Jack in the Box, you know that there's a surprise coming at any moment. You Are My Sunshine always brings a positive attitude to everything they do. Elastigirl, Mrs. Incredible, super flexible in all situations and can adapt to whatever is needed. Speed McQueen, everything is done at a high rate of speed. Queen's Gambit, they're playing chess, not checkers, always thinking and playing one or more moves ahead of the opposition. Cool Runnings always finds ways to make her line mates or pairing better as a group than individuals. This beauty is a beast, great teammate off the ice and a fierce competitor when the puck drops. Blades of Glory, skates the game with ease, makes it look effortless. The Berlin Wall, the last line of defense, who stands in the way of an opponent every chance that they get. behind the camera, never looking to steal the scene, but their efforts behind the scenes will make the team shine. So those are things, and the kids can pick players that go along with that.
Can you send that to me?
Yep, I can.
Do you mind if I share it with everybody? Because that's priceless. And I think, like, the art of coaching is coaches will pick, they'll get something out of this, thinking about their team in a different way, realizing behind the X's and O's, this is what matters. And these are what I think the great coaches, the successful coaches, they're able to find the chemistry of their group and put the strengths to the biggest advantage they possibly can. And I think that's just tremendous, Jordan. It's so good to have you on. And, Peter, have you heard anything like what Jordan's talked about before and applied that in a formal way?
I have a lot of similar things, not to the entertaining piece of Jordan being in tune with everything from kids' movies to music, but in terms of the idea of getting them to respond to those types of questions, yes, for sure. And again, it just speaks to the importance of more so than the X's and O's, because, well, and you brought up the point very early on when you were mentioning how you didn't know anything about coaching football, but you were able to teach yourself, learn the X's and O's part of it. And I think that holds true today with, again, so many of the young coaches that I see, very good at the X's and O's piece. But where you fall short in actually creating a program instead of creating a team. The team is the X's and O's and the skill players and all those things they need to do. But a program is things like Jordan talked about, you mentioned, like Tom talked about the veterans as they go through the process, the standards remain the same. That's when you know you've created an actual program. And doing all these types of things, getting to know those players, having them understand that you care, that there is value, that there are standards, and then them grabbing a hold of it. And something as simple as saying goodbye to the coaches. That's something that when that group started that on day one and it's 10 years later and it's still doing that, then you have the satisfaction of knowing you actually created a program and it wasn't just a team. So I love all this stuff. I mean, this is so important. It's more fun, if you will, as a coach, because you get to be creative as a human being and you can win a lot more games with it.
Well, I really like that. You sort of tied the bow to the Sharks call, summarizing everything like that. And Jordan, thank you so much for coming on today. As usual, we didn't have anything that specifically we wanted to go to, and initially I wanted to talk about successful coaches and what they did that was unique and different. And I think we've discussed things that we all can get better at. And coaches out there listening to what we're saying will appreciate the importance of the scope of what we do as coaches in terms of communicating and getting our messages delivered in a way that inspires people to be better. So I want to thank you guys all for coming on, and looking forward to editing up this into bits and pieces. And you guys have a great weekend. Craig Parrott is off to the national championships with the U18 provincial team, so I'm hoping to get to a few more different games at different levels to watch. And looking forward to the U13 games, of course, that I'm primarily responsible for. So all the best. Have a great day. And Jordan, welcome back to the building. And the staff and the kids, and pretty soon they'll be just in the swing of things, and they won't be thinking about in a negative way about what's been going on and what is going on. They just as teachers, like usual, you just keep your heads down and you do things the best you can for the right reason. And I think that's why we're educators and coaches. Okay, guys,
Thanks,
Take care,
Wally.
gentlemen.
take care.
Yeah.